What's up, Guitar Players Club? Check this out. So today we're talking about tone and why is it so important to us? Why is tone so important to us? So I'm going to tell you why I think it is. Okay. So one of the first things that a newborn does once a baby is born is, there's typically a cry that comes out. That's usually like the initial thing. And sometimes when it doesn't happen, hopefully there's not like an unfortunate reason, but otherwise, sometimes as the baby is getting cleaned and, the fluid is being, sucked out of them with syringes and stuff like that, babies typically let out that initial cry. And that is one of the first things that the baby hears once they pass the threshold. You know what I'm saying? Now, of course, babies hear while the mother is pregnant. So there are sounds heard initially while the baby is in the womb. But to be honest with you, they don't hear the highs, they only hear the lows. So, but they can start to distinguish tone at that point. But once they pass the threshold, now everything sounds brighter. So after becoming so acquainted with the lows, of the frequency spectrum, now it's like, okay, now I have a different vantage point of sound at this point. And then babies start to learn the guardian's voice and their own voices. They start to like experiment with it. So, there's this thing called like chest voice, head voice, you got diaphragm that's pushing the air through the vocal cords and all that other stuff. But I just wanted to place emphasis on all these different variables that produces a human voice. First of all, every single sound known to man has a spectrum of tones that we associate with that thing. But as far as the human voice is concerned, it's one of the first things that we hear. It's probably the first thing is the baby's voice and the things that the baby hears while it's in the mother's stomach or uterus. Those are the initial things, okay? The closest things, especially the mother's voice. And that chest voice, okay, is what that baby initially hears, aside from its own. And this is why the baby typically wants to be close to a mother's chest, because it's that warmth, okay, that a baby loves. And guess what? As adults, we still love that chest tone, that resonant tone, okay? So I really do believe that we associate this with instrumental tones as well. We notice if a sound comes out too thin, we typically don't like it. Even bell-like tones have a high and low aspect of it. So while I'm talking, what I would like to do is I would like to demonstrate what I mean when I say this. So I'm actually going to share my screen here. And right here we see a channel EQ is basically showing the spectrum, the EQ spectrum, okay, frequency spectrum. And I'm going to just play a sound and you can see what actually lights up. So I'm just going to randomly push something. Okay, so this human voice, okay, we can see this entire, like from, let's say, 80 hertz all the way up to about 10K. We hear this spectrum of vocal, okay? So it's not just up top up here. Okay. Now, if I were to roll this off, okay, you can still sort of hear that, right? So the reason why I'm pointing this out is because we still hear this in the vocal mix of just the human voice, period. Okay. Now, when I talked about the chest voice, okay, that is probably, perhaps, what a baby hears. Or like, you know, in a fetal position, or like a, you know, inside of a uterus. That's probably what, you know, a baby hears in a mother's womb. But when you mix the two, and obviously you have the mids right here, you know, you can take that out. But we typically gravitate toward a full spectrum of frequency when it comes to guitar tone. Okay, so even though this is a human voice, wait for me, and this is, you know, these are singing voices, you can hear the highs as well as the lows. Okay, well, let me do this. Sorry. All right, so we can hear that. And whenever something sounds like this, whenever something is like this, you will hear somebody usually say, yeah, it sounds thin. It might sound thin in a mix or whatever else. So we typically don't like a vocal that sounds that way. And we typically don't want for our guitar tone to sound that way. So let me just show this as well. I mean, you even have drum sounds, you know. I probably don't even have to show this, but, you know, a more percussive sound may be up top. You got some that's in the middle. You have some that's low. Okay, so this is just a visual. And let me even add my own voice in the mix. Okay, check. So this is my speaking voice. And my voice is actually spanning across the entire spectrum almost. Okay, so let me actually record. I'm just want to see what happens. This is my speaking voice. We are testing the highs and lows, or the high and low frequencies of a human voice. All right. Sorry if that sounded kind of corny. But anyway, is my speaking voice. All right. So if I were to roll this off, you know, in the same way that I did the other vocals, we are testing the highs and lows, or the high and low frequencies of a human voice. Okay. So this is my speaking voice. We are testing the highs and lows, or the high and low frequencies. All right. So, and maybe our tone preference comes from our own voices. Who knows? So let me just come back onto the main screen. So, you know, I believe that our guitar tone preference is largely due to what we prefer in a human vocal sense. Okay, we like the resonance, you know, and as that mixes with the tongue and teeth scenario, we kind of just imagine that coming from an instrument. Now, I don't think that when people are picking out a guitar, you know, that they say, well, I want my guitar to sound like a human. I don't think that happens. I'm just saying in terms of tone, this is what we prefer in general. You don't want a thin sounding saxophone. You don't want a thin sounding piano. You don't want a thin, none of those things. But right now we're talking about guitar. So if I were to take all the lows out of my guitar, let's say. Let's turn this down. This is typically not the preferred. Don't sound too bad, but you know, we just don't typically go for that. Now, there we go. Come on, autofocus. We don't typically go for. Now I had to turn my mic down for you to really hear it, but that sounds muffled, okay? Because you would have picked up my fingers hitting the strings. So, you know, that's just not typically something that we would prefer. That sounds very like 50s, you know, like old record tones, which is, you know, sometimes we like that, but we still mix that muffled guitar tone with, you know, high frequency piano, and you hear the cymbals, and you're playing the guitar and stuff in the context of a full band. And typically people don't prefer that. There's typically another instrument that, you know, that is occupying the higher frequencies. Also, so, you know, people may reminisce, you know, from a nostalgia perspective, but when they're playing guitar, they typically don't want that. So so that's what this tone knob actually helps to kind of tame that, okay? So the tone knob is the one in the middle right here. Well, this one, this tone knob and this tone knob actually controls the tone or the highs. It rolls off the highs for the one in the middle. It does it for the first two, and the back one it does for the last two. It kind of mixes it. And this is a 5-way switch, okay? So yeah, when it comes to tone, we like that balance. We go for a guitar tone that has a mix of high frequencies and low frequencies that are just on the thicker end, you know, thicker than not. And we might like different mixes of what that sounds like. But the first position right here is, this is the neck, which is a much more vocal sound. So if I were to give you an example, now in that sound, you can hear that attack from the highs, from the pick. You know, you even hear, you know, a little bit of what's going in the mic. You can hear the pick a little bit. You can hear that scrape a little bit. You know, people want to hear that. They want to hear that articulation. When I switch to the second position, which is this pickup and this pickup, okay, now it's a mix between the neck pickup and the middle pickup. So it sounds a little bit brighter. Then the middle position is straight middle. Okay. So that's that sound. Then you go up to the, I guess, the fourth position right here. And I'm thinking that's what these are called. That's the middle and the humbucker. The middle and the bridge position. Different tone. And then the bridge position is like, you know, straight high gain, you know, which is really best for like distortion. Typically, when people want to play distortion or like overdrive, they typically go to one of these, or at least I do. The fourth or the fifth position is what I typically go for. One of these, okay? So, and it just is really useful for for distortion, and even with distortion tones. Um, I don't like the piercing, distorted sound. I don't. The grungy, high gain, and all you hear is, let's say, I don't like that, and I don't know why people play that. I don't like that. Something like this, like this. It's a mix. You can hear the lows, and you have the tone knob here that'll roll back on those some as well. So this is just a quick talk, a quick discussion about why I think people really like a balance of highs and lows in their playing. At least I do. This is what I think it is. I believe that there is an association that that we qualify in our heads based on the human voice. And that's really what I think it is. So oftentimes, anytime I'm setting my EQ, anytime I'm setting my vocal tone, my guitar tone, I'm taking into account what the human voice does. Okay. You got the chest tone, the chest voice. You got the head voice, and how the air comes through. Okay. The windpipes, and how the tongue and teeth have to meet in a way to make the articulation come through, is a lot like if a violin player is playing, you hear what's coming out of the body, but you also hear that slide from the bow. Okay? With a harp player, same thing. You hear the fingers on the strings, the actual attack. People like that. But then they actually hear the vibration of the strings. That's a different thing, but people tend to favor hearing a pick tack on a string of a guitar. They tend to want to hear that. And if they don't hear that, it's not as articulate. So yeah, that's typically what it is. And that's what I think it comes from. It's just, we love the human voice, and even when people are soloing, when guitar players are soloing, it's beneficial to study singers. It's not necessarily studying guitar, you're studying singers, and you mimic what the singer's doing on your guitar. Okay. So that's pretty much it. That's what I got. Okay. I kind of started out with a story on, as a baby, we grow, we learn our own voices, and we go through a process of just learning how to speak a language. You say your first words at about 6 months, maybe it's, mama, dada, or whatever, and then you're able to say, me, or, these one word utterances, and then it goes from there. So learning to articulate on a guitar is sort of similar. I don't think it takes as long, but it's sort of similar in that, we learn how to articulate ourselves. It's a process on guitar in a way that we have to find our voice and we have to find our tone. But a great way to find your tone is to, just decide, kind of reflect, like what exactly do you resonate with? No pun intended. But find what resonates with you. What do you resonate with? All that stuff. And I just think that a good balanced tone is a good place to start. Make sure that you can hear some lows. You know, looking for a guitar, you roll back that tone knob, okay, all the way. And then open it up all the way. And you should be able to hear a balance of low and high frequencies from the instrument in combination with the amp or the pedals that you're playing through. And you should have a good, solid tone. All right. So. Let's bring some reverb. All right, y'all. Peace.